Nah, I got something to prove and I ain't never gonna give up. Plenty of juice and I ain't never gonna waste it. Something to do and I ain't never wanna quit it. So come on, get a little bit, I know you wanna play with it.
Coming to you from Studio Iguana Monk down in the Big Dirty, it's the Twisted Podcast, where we explore what it means to be a working artist living in the real world. Please welcome your hosts, Larry Lines and Troy Winscott.
All right, this is the Twisted Pop Podcast, Episode 3. I am Larry Lines.
I'm Troy Winscott.
Good deal. So this week we have a I Hate Art segment about madness and genius that we talk about. We usually just take a question, one of us really just trying to stump the other with some subject. This week it's madness and genius. And then we have an interview with Ryan Sishc. I'm going to get that right eventually. He's a writer based in Albuquerque, and it's a really interesting conversation. So far, we've been slowly pulling this whole thing together. I think we're starting to get there to the point that I have a feeling of what we're supposed to be saying and how we're supposed to be saying it. What do you think?
I can't remember any of the conversations that we had, which you seem to think is a great opportunity just to forget shit or have really great episodes.
Well, we could overthink every single episode and never get anything out.
Yeah.
We also got some acoustic stuff up on the walls in here, so we're starting to cut down on the echoing. So
fancy.
We're not quite professional yet, but I can count the times that each of us are saying so we're not into the infinity of ums and likes and stuff like that and awkward silences. So we're getting there.
That's good.
All right, we're going to launch into some art that we hate.
I hate art. Art is stupid. Art is boring. A-R-T-T art.
Whether we are creatives or mad scientists, and I was wondering your opinion on which you would classify Mark Pringle. And can you relay a story about Mark Pringle that points to whether he was more mad scientist? Let me define a little bit more. And creatives, we feel like creatives are just the muse, just inspired. But mad science is through series of experimentation to receive your talent.
I don't really know. Mark is.
Is and was.
I mean, he could be a mad scientist and he could be just a creative, right? Because you sort of see him flip between them, and he was never satisfied with one, right? And I have the same problem. Like, you can't just give me a guitar and expect me to live my life, right? I can't. You know what I mean? Like, it's not going to work that way for me. I have to.
Good point.
Like, if I didn't overcomplicate stuff, then I would never be able to write a song or anything. Like, I wouldn't be able to come up with anything. So, I do a lot of programming, and yeah, I make a living doing that particular thing. But I feel like, I've talked about this before. I feel like a lot of the problem with people we know is that we're good at too many things. And the people that we're actually, we admire for their success, that's all they could do. That's it. And Mark, there's no way he was going to make it past 6 months on a project. Like, because he was just going to go, I'm done with programming. I want to record an album. I want to write a symphony. And then he would start working on that, and then
or an opera, or a biplane, or
yeah. And at some point, everything would just blow up in his face, and he would go, "I have to do something different because I can." And I know a lot of people that are, and I try to learn from these people too. There's nothing wrong with like having focused on only one thing to the point to exclude all other things. But I seem to always be hedging my own bets. I don't think that Mark did it like that. That's what sort of made him seem more mad, is that he didn't go, he wasn't hedging his bets. He was just like all into whatever thing that he was into at that moment. Like it, and he still does it, from what I can tell.
So more specific to the point, do you think it just becomes this rhetorical question, Mittens? More of how do you work?
Yes. And I think that, there's that story about Einstein. It's an essay by like his nephew or something like that. And he would go, he kept trying to give his nephew a yo-yo for his birthday. But he never got the yo-yo because Einstein would go, see what it does, and then he would explain the physics behind it. And then he would take that off, and he would never actually got the yo-yo. And it was like 3 or 4 years in a row. They tried to give him a yo-yo. And then there's like stories like from his secretary where they were trying to, where the NSA or whatever the group was that was working on the Manhattan Project would come in and they would organize the shit on his desk after hours so that the first things he would see when he got to work were the things that they wanted him working on. Because if the thing that he saw first wasn't the Manhattan Project, then he was going to work on that.
Fucking pick up the yo-yo and fucking spin the fuck off.
Yeah, and it would take the whole day, and there was no talking him out of it, obviously, or he would have given up the yo-yo to his nephew, right? And so there were pencils. They didn't want him sharpening a pencil because he would go to the pencil sharpener and go, "What the fuck is that?" Right? And I'm probably exaggerating and so paraphrasing because I haven't read this story in so many years, but I think about it a lot because this is honestly, I could see it happening to me, and you could totally see it happening to somebody like Mark Pringle, where he would wake up in the morning, and then you would go, "We're going to work out," and then it would be like martial arts all day. But you could have been talking to him the day before about doing martial arts, and he was going, "Nope, got this biplane to build. I'm going to do nothing but that tomorrow." But he saw you, and the first thing in his head was martial arts.
Yeah.
He was just like, "I'm out."
Yeah.
And then you would go, "What about the biplane?" He goes, "This is more important." Right? The way he talked like that.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, and everything was centered around that, like for the rest of the day, and you'd go out to dinner, and then it was like steamed vegetables, and he was negotiating with the chef, right, at a $5 Chinese restaurant. Anyway.
So I think that's today's topic.
It's a lot of movement, and that was about it.
You don't remember anything else?
No. Oh, yes. We were sitting there, and as soon as the movie started, everything starts happening. The Transformers fall from the sky, and when Optimus Prime comes onto the screen, my dad leans forward and goes, "Oh my God, it's Optimus Prime!" And I don't know, I was probably about 10.
Yeah.
It was pretty embarrassing.
Oh, yeah, see, you were so embarrassed.
It was really upsetting.
I also shouted out through the whole movie, "I think I'm having a seizure."
Yeah. That's just, that's just that movie.
You just remember
that
pure
Michael Bay?
constant embarrassment.
Yeah, going to see movies with him is it's fucked up.
Oh my God, it's Optimus Prime. That was hilarious. That was a good one. That was a good one.
Yeah, that's the most noticeable one. Most of the time, it's just obnoxious.
My favorite is to make comments during the previews.
But that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. I think when we went to go see, what was it, Guardians of the Galaxy? Wonder Woman.
Mm-hmm.
There was a movie that came on. Oh, it was the new Transformers movie.
Yes, yeah.
And I made a loud comment about, at the end of it,
I think
how it looked like eye candy with a seizure and bad writing, without the writing. And everyone around me kind of looked at me and acknowledged that.
yes, the people around,
right.
they were also in the back of the theater,
Yes,
and I think
yes.
that's sort of a general feeling of the back of the theater.
You can do that like during previews.
It
People
got a
don't
good
care.
nod.
They don't have those advertisements to shut the hell up for the previews. It's just
Right.
a movie.
They remind you at the end. That's a good point. So you're allowed to say
Yeah.
as much as you want. But once the movie starts,
No,
Shut the fuck up, Troy.
No.
Shut the fuck up, Troy.
No. If it's not that great a movie, it won't shut me up. And if it's a really good movie, it'll shut me up.
Is the next Star Wars in December?
Mm-hmm.
Is it December?
It's like 14th or something. That may be wrong.
Or we're
but-
breaking up in November.
No, actually, that's a really good movie.
Because you're afraid of laser swords?
You're
I just
gonna whip
just
out your
rewatched The
laser
Force
sword and run
Awakens.
around the theater.
Oh, that would be
Made
so
me appreciate
badass.
how much
Look
I
at me,
needed
I've got a
Rogue One.
laser sword.
I liked Rogue One better than Force Awakens.
You did?
Yeah, because Force Awakens was just episode 4 again, and it made me sad.
Oh.
Whereas episode 8 is just going to be episode 5 again, and it's going to make me sad.
You think he's going to keep with that pattern?
Well, they have the walker, the flyers, or the speeders flying at the walkers, like on Hoth again.
Mm.
You see it in the trailer, and you're like,
Yeah.
Also, the trailer is just a shot-for-shot remake of the last trailer, so there's that. Yeah, go watch it. You'll see, if you watch them side by side, they're just the same thing. It's the same style.
No kidding.
They're not taking any risks
Now,
with this one.
wait a minute, though. your dad has some very interesting observations on where things are going.
Oh yeah, I think I don't think the big secret is that Rey is Luke's daughter. I think the big secret is that Kylo Ren is a double agent.
Oh.
This is what I think. And that little asshole at your little kid party made me come to this theory.
Don't call Lucy an asshole.
Oh no, but yeah, I know
loves
who you're
his
talking
daughter.
about.
That's
That
not
little kid.
appropriate.
Yeah.
saying that Darth Vader was a punk and a black costume.
I don't think Rey is Luke's daughter.
I do.
I don't. I think that she's the reincarnated chosen one, is what I think.
Which is basically Luke's daughter.
No, that's
It's-
not how that works.
Yeah, that's Luke was the chosen one, just like Atigan, right? But I think the big secret. I mean, if they don't go that route, I'm not disappointed.
Well, no.
But I think the big secret is that Kylo Ren is a double agent,
I think
and
you're
they're
wrong.
hunting. Huh?
I think you're wrong.
I don't.
Yeah, I know. I
But
know
you
you
also
don't.
had some theories about reincarnated Darth Vader, too.
Oh yeah. Well, because it's
Well, that's
it's,
Rey. She's reincarnated Darth
No,
Vader because he's the
like,
chosen one. That's why the lightsaber called out to her. I don't think they're gonna double down that hard on the prequels. I
Well,
think they're trying to get away from
We've
those.
discussed this
That's
many
what
times.
this is what I said
and
as
I
well.
think I'm leaning that direction.
As much as I enjoy the prequels for
Today we're interviewing Ryan Sishc. Is how you pronounce that last name?
it is now.
Sishc.
We'll keep it that way.
Is it Sishc?
It's Sishc.
Sishc. Ryan
You know how to
Sishc,
pronounce his last
which
name?
is, well, because like he's recently changed.
Actually,
his
that's
You
why I
changed the
refused to introduce him
pronunciation of your
because I
last
don't know
name?
how to
He
pronounce
has recently changed his last name.
The pronunciation, because
Did you get married and take on a girl's last name?
that's not how that works.
Probably closer to the original, like, was it
It
Czechoslovakian?
was Sax originally, and then
Sax.
and then it got
How's it spelled?
Sishc.
That makes no sense.
It used to be, everyone used to say it was pronounced Sykes, right? But I was like, everyone just gets it wrong anyway, so I'll just be Sishc. And so gradually, I'll become the Shishk family. When I have children, they'll be Shishks.
Shishkas.
Kebabs.
No.
The Shishkas.
I can call you
Shishkas.
Bill Shish Kebab.
You know, the
That's your
Shishkas.
nickname.
The Shishkas.
Anyway.
So it's a Czech name.
Yeah, that was fucked up due to a clerical error as it came over like across. So the Czechs were Sax, S-A-C-H-S, and then when they came over, someone was just like, "What's that last name? How do you spell it?" I'll just write some letters down, and then it became S-I-S-H-C.
That's my theory about my name too. I think it was Lions or something like that, some Dutch name, and or Leans or something like that. I don't know.
Or Linus.
Something.
I'm sure they didn't carry customs.
No,
Linus.
sure. Ellis Island or something like that. They just went,
Linus.
whatever.
Get in our country.
You have TB. That's
No.
way more important.
Right.
Wait, so
Right.
wait, is it your mom's last name?
Yeah.
Okay.
Winscott, there's no question how to pronounce that. I mean,
And where it came from.
And
No,
where it came
there
from.
is question.
Trex Winthorpe.
Because originally it was Wainscott,
yeah.
but then during some kind of like a Civil War split in Missouri, is the legend here, is that they didn't want to be associated with the Wainscots. And so it was changed to Winscott, and I think they ran off to Indian Territory is what the rumor is on that.
Huh, interesting. You're thinking,
But I think
even
what's
stuff
what-
that you think is easy.
What I think is more interesting is like how people just mispronounce your name no matter what.
Yeah, like everybody calls Justine Justin.
Justin.
Like,
Really?
yeah, what on earth? It's an E there.
Do they
Come
fuck
on.
up Ryan?
No, not really. That's a pretty common
Rion,
name.
maybe?
No. And, I mean, They don't.
Maybe in
Ryan.
the South that you would be Rianne.
I've never had. Well, in New Mexico, right? I mean, the only way to
Rianne
mispronounce it would be to
Sishc.
roll the R, and no one's rolled the R so far as I know.
Right.
Ryan. No one does that because people are smart. Cross your fingers.
My brother, Carrie, they mispronounced his name one time at a doctor's office and called him Barry Winthorpe. And he ended up naming his computer Barry Winthorpe.
He should have broken into some soul music at that point.
Ah, girl, I love
me! Woo!
girl. So we're here today interviewing Ryan Sishc in the bloodiest, hottest room in the building.
That's true.
I was wondering what all that was all over the walls.
Is a scene. It was a scene.
There was an incident. But it's the bloodiest room in the joint because we shot a shooting, an office shooting in here.
Shot
Yeah.
a shooting. Yeah.
Yeah. Filmed a shooting, if that's video to shooting.
And this is after cleaning up.
Yeah.
So there was a lot more in here. So
Oh.
Okay.
Jeez.
So Ryan Sishc
Yeah.
is a writer.
Aspiring.
Aspiring writer.
Aspiring.
You're a writer.
You're a writer. I've read your stuff. It's good.
Writer. Nope. Do you write? Do you write?
Yes.
Okay, you're a writer.
Yeah, okay. And I've written stuff that's been published, kind of.
Well, then you're.
So-
That's
Oh,
you are
really?
also a published
like
writer in addition
Articles,
to being a writer.
advertising articles.
So why would you even add that aspiring?
So you've
Don't
done
be
some
modest.
commercial
Don't be modest.
writing. And
I've done
stuff.
some commercial writing, but in terms of like published stuff, aspiring to be published, and I've done commercial writing. You know, I consider that the lesser form of writing
Yes,
because it's
I understand why.
more you fall more into like a rut when doing that, less than like let's appease a whole bunch of people.
But
You're
it's
just
also
doing someone else.
crafting your way toward inspiration.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's kind of followed alongside my my college studies. I recently graduated and got my bachelor's degree in English. Thank you. And I'm going for my MFA in the fall in fiction.
Straight into grad school.
Straight in, just don't stop the stride. And my writing.
So what program did you get into?
University of New Mexico's fine arts fiction program. It's pretty good down there. I mean, they like to produce.
Congratulations, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, thank you. It's not a terrible
I
program.
would call you a writer at this point.
Grad school.
Thank you,
Yeah.
thank you. And so my writing, it's just followed my academic career, and I've worked through. I started my commercial writing while I was in school, and then I stopped my commercial writing when I was in school because I was just I wanted to pursue my own stuff, and now I'm forging on ahead towards publishing, editing draft after draft until I bleed from the ears. So yeah, that's just where I'm at.
Yeah, that's what it takes.
Yeah.
Can you
Dedication.
tell us about the story?
I can't.
Give us. This is a little book preview here,
A little
right?
book preview. So it's a story that's so it's fantasy. It's a fantasy novel. It takes place kind of in this world where society is very sparse. Like there's these clusterings of civilization, and then in between them there's these vast swaths of nature that are very untamed, and humans have regressed to these very basic sort of levels. And it focuses on the society that's been like they're in this valley between this fault line where this fog is settled. It's impenetrable. People haven't been able to leave. People haven't been able to go in. And it focuses on a group of characters who, 400 years after this fog is settled, the fog goes away. And so there's the society in this fog, these nomadic tribes that are going around just kind of living their lives. And as the fog is pushed away, it's on the fault between these two larger, like stronger, more modern countries that kind of dip into this, who want this land for resources. And it's about the struggle over this land, and like the characters on both sides of this focuses on one side, like this large kind of nationalistic, World War I type industrial power that moves in to try to take these resources, and like the struggle of like these people inside as they're kind of gathered up and like pushed to the side so they can build their railways and stuff like that. And there's monsters in this fault lands, and just the creatures of this sort of natural this natural hierarchy that are constantly at odds with modernity. And that's about it. I don't want to spoil anything. But
What were your influences on building?
Influences. So obviously, my second major was in history, so early 1900s military or just history, and so I pulled a lot from like the sort of like nationalist fervor that swept over a lot of countries in the early 1900s, like 1910s, and then other fantasy things like Tolkien, obviously, for the sort of like mythical aspect. Everyone pulls from Tolkien, of course. I played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons in my youth, and
What?
you know this.
That sounds like a delinquency.
It was,
Who plays Dungeons and Dragons? That's weird.
and so this idea of like monsters, that you just kind of find everywhere, like you're constantly at odds with the world around you, and I like that idea. I like the idea that like, humanity they're not necessarily at the top of the food chain in these sorts of worlds. They're constant, and that kind of, you can look at different aspects of humanity if you pit them against things that are stronger and greater themselves in some way. And then, in terms of like my writing style, I like to pull a lot from people like Steinbeck. They're very vivid, kind of, I don't know, I wouldn't call Steinbeck very verbose. He's
Dense.
a little dense, which I'm learning to unravel and pack a little bit because, not everyone wants to go out and read Steinbeck.
It's a difficult writing style to get
for
past,
sure.
Today's audience, maybe.
Yeah, you gotta, but I find it's better to go dense, first, and then unravel it, pull it apart, make it easier to read as you go on. Better to have more than less in the beginning. So.
It sounds like there's maybe some Nordic undertones.
I'd say there is some Nordic kind of inspiration, like these great,
Okay.
but it's mostly like Gaelic. I've
okay.
kind of dipped into some of the less known Gaelic mythology, or like inspirations. It's because it's not really an area that's super explored. Is there kind of mythologies and legends, and they're pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So
They are.
they are pretty cool.
And it's vast.
It is vast, but it's also inconsistent because there's a lot of like we don't really know what they believe because everything they've recorded for like what the Celts believed or what the is from Christians who came after the fact and wrote it down, so it's kind of distorted. There's a lot of inconsistencies, but hey, whatever.
Christians distort things?
I know, right?
How weird. I
don't know. I
think
thought
so.
maybe there were some Nordic undertones because of like maybe the creation story has some myths in it. Mist. Like mysterious mists of the viper and blah blah blah.
No, it's just so this mist kind of settled after the creation of the of the world, right? Like there were people there. They were in tune with everyone else, and then for some reason or another, this mist settled and cut them off. From
You're talking about like the map thing, like there be dragons or something like that on the other side of that.
I'm reaching.
Okay.
Right. No worries. That is a big thing, is trying to figure out like where this mist came from, why it was there, and who pushed it aside, who opened it, kind of thing.
It's kind of a classic. What's beyond the mist? What's beyond the veil? What's beyond And you find that a lot in Gaelic, like into the veil. What's beyond the veil? The Sith are back there. The fairyland. Blah 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 blah.
Absolutely, that's definitely what I'm going for there. It's there's these.
So one of the things that always interests me about like the idea of creating a whole new world, right? Is it's such a huge risk. So that's why you see such a people so attached to the Marvel universe, because the world's already created. Now you just have to add a new superpower, a new person with it. So are you sort of drawn to this idea of creating a world, or is it?
So absolutely. I mean, I've always found world building to be one of the most, or just like sitting, doing the behind the scenes work of tailoring a world to be such a fun experience. And because once you have the world made, I mean, you can always retailor it for other purposes if your first thing doesn't take off. But the experience it's just so entertaining to me as someone who's very interested in like history, to kind of construct this series of events in a different context from our own. So like examining, what if this happened, or what would things be like if, here be dragons sort of thing, or what would things be like if this happened and not this happened, and kind of, it's just different ways to look at how humanity is, to kind of remove it from our world, and kind of separate these things so you can do it without pre-existing biases or something like that. I think it's fun. I love, just sitting there and writing, events and events and events, just for my own personal value, so that I can better frame my work.
And there's so much that you've already said that sort of leans toward like this idea of world creation, because that's what D&D is about. That's like what a lot of the
That's
role
why
playing.
he's such a good DM.
Absolutely. I mean, we're all fascinated with the world with which we live in, right? And I mean,
And it's also like what always disappoints me, like I guess with just taking more and more pieces of the same worlds, is that there's just a lot less expected of the audience, right? And I know it's a bigger risk, right? Like you take something like Star Wars or Marvel, and you can make $1 billion off of it. But
right.
I like the idea that you can take a new world and you just there's a whole new thing there. So I'm not sure if it's the risk of creators, or maybe it's just that there's not that many creators with enough imagination to create that much of a world.
Well, I think it's a little of both. So, you want to stick with what people know. Like, you stick with the heroes that people know. It's also a lot of work. It's a lot of time, and it's a lot of unpaid effort. I mean, you have to sit aside and just do this, and it's not really making you any money. It's not making anyone any money.
If you're making the world, you're just starting it. It's not like you've already established something.
Right, and you can write, let's say, if you just create a world and never make a book out of it, it's, I mean, not wasted effort, but it's unmonetizable effort. So, you don't see a lot of big groups going for this sort of stuff. I mean, occasionally you see films that kind of dip into a new universe, or, I think graphic novels are a very good medium for creating new universes.
Yeah, and I say all that, but in our lifetime, Harry Potter is a whole new universe.
Right.
It's related to a lot. You can relate.
Yeah, everything draws on something else,
Yeah.
right? You're looking at history to pull from some of the
Right,
ideas.
and history is, I think, you see that a lot in like contemporary authors like George R.R. Martin. He pulled, straight from the War of the Roses and England, and
Tolkien didn't he have a military background?
Tolkien. You can see a lot of influence by his like World War I like experience,
Yeah.
and a lot of his stuff is just directly pulled from Anglo-Saxon history, like his lore, just Anglo-Saxon myth. He just takes words from Old English and just puts them into his story, sort of thing. And so, I mean, you have to have the will and someone who has the will and the effort to create like a new, original kind of idea or world, or something like that. And it doesn't necessarily have to be that in depth. Like every new book that comes out, or not any new, but most have their own world that they're set in. Like,
Right.
like
It's how detailed some of them go into it. Some of the ones that get the most attention, the well-known, like Tolkien, there, George R. R.
Right,
Martin.
right.
It's like they are extremely large, well detailed. They're followed by huge appendices and stuff like that. With
right.
Well, as Troy was saying just a couple weeks ago about reading Tolkien, and about how like a big portion of it was like, what'd you say? So and so begot so and so, who begot so and so, and all
Yeah,
that.
right.
Yeah.
I mean, like the Matrix has its own universe, right? But that's nowhere near the level of like some
I
other
just
things.
find Tolkien particularly tedious to read, because it reads like the Bible to me.
Well, absolutely, he was
Isaiah beget.
He was supporting
Ishmael.
languages that
Yeah.
he was
But I
inventing.
liked
for
that
the-
because it kept
and
me.
so it kept like his
hooked.
world. He was like
My
going
brain
so
was-
much further with the world, like that he wanted every detail of it supported.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yes, reading the Lord of the Rings, you make your way through it.
Yeah.
The Hobbit moves a lot faster.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's much shorter.
That's why I was able to make it through The Hobbit and not The Lord of the Rings. But I smoked my way through the hobo
Hobo.
Hobbit.
I,
Hobo. But anyway, to digress back to the story, the particular era that you've chosen, we had a discussion earlier, a couple days back, about how where World War II, the stories there are just infinite. I mean, it's just, they'll never end. We'll be telling stories about World War II for the rest of like humanity, because it's just so vast, full of stories. But we were talking about World War I, that there hasn't been like these classic epic, like Saving Private Ryan type moment movies around World War I, that they just kind of glance in and out. Like Sucker Punch has a steampunk version, and like we got to see Wonder Woman like cross no man's land, and there's occasionally like some kind of touchstone on like World War I. But
there's sort of more of the introspective thing, like All Quiet on the Western Front.
Yeah.
But nothing like, this was the death and dying and adventure of World War I.
Right. And so do you think that you'll find particular problems like telling stories around that asshole nationalist kind of era?
So there is some particular challenges with it. World War II, as we're talking about, is what defines like the modern era and the modern psyche. It was after World War II that we became society, like Western civilization became as it is now. But in that sort of nationalist, fervor, I don't think so. I mean, you can humanize anything, if you know how to do it.
Well,
like, you can humanize
you're not telling a pure World War I battle on the Western Front story. I mean, you're again touchstoning in like, here's the moments.
Right, here's the moments. You kind of build towards them, and you use that like kind of to frame it, but you use this kind of fantastical setting to kind of help people understand, maybe why someone would go to such extents for their country, or why something so morally gray could happen. World War I is interesting because it's a big question of like, could this have been avoided, or like, are we all wrapped up in what countries are doing? It really raises questions of identity, which I think is pretty interesting. And it's just, it can be pretty bleak at times just because it was such a bleak era, but you can pull a lot from the human psyche from that, and kind of see how humans endure trauma before and after, like through these like horrible kind of experiences.
Huh.
Tell us about your biggest failure.
The biggest failure? That's a hard one, because I don't fail. But no.
Gee, you sound related to somebody.
It sounds contractual at this point.
Don't
fail it.
No. I mean, of course, everyone fails. I'm sure, this is a pretty generic answer, but when it comes to school, could have done a little better. Could have put in a little bit more effort.
Have we all said that? I think Steven's interview, I think he said that. I don't remember what I said, but I'm sure that's one of mine. I didn't try.
You made it through college.
I made it through, but I could have made it through a little better.
Grad school, whatever.
You're 22, 23?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
You're 22, right?
It's pretty amazing.
I turned 23
and not yet. What? Right? In a couple weeks, right?
Yeah, the 6th.
On the 6th or the 7th?
7th.
Okay, because your birthday, I know, is right after
I leave.
You leave.
Yeah.
So should we have a party?
No.
A birthday party? Balloons?
Any hoozle?
Yeah.
Kazoos? Party hats?
No.
No.
What's next? What's next on the question? Get me out of here.
Get me out of here.
What's the best rumor you've ever heard about yourself?
The best rumor I've ever heard about myself?
I like that.
Oh, I don't know.
If there isn't one, that's cool.
I don't think there is one. I don't think people talk about me very much.
Well,
you need to go
as opposed to the opposite, you go where I think everybody's talking about me.
I guess I have heard rumors amongst my coworkers that I come into work like completely stoned every day, which doesn't happen. But they're like, "Yeah, you come into work all the time, Blaze, don't you?" And I'm like, "No, I'm just here. I'm churning my way through the corporate system completely sober, thank you."
That's funny.
I guess that is one.
That's a good one. Nice.
What's at the top of the list there?
When did you get interested in comics? Are you interested in comics?
I am.
Maybe we'll just go toward writing. When did you get interested in writing?
So I started writing when I was very, very young, probably around, it was about 5th or 6th grade. I don't know, how old are you in 5th and 6th grade? 10, 11.
10 and 5th.
I would just sit there and write. So it started originally like I would draw just like kind of quasi comics, like page by page. I would just draw scenes and scenes and scenes of like pictures to kind of create a narrative. I guess I could say my dad did this if he wants to feel honored.
Oh, so he's a part of it.
Yeah, he inspired me towards drawing, and so I would just have these big binders full of page after page after page of like weird kind of childish stories, and then I translated that into writing, and I'd have my mother buy me those fancy moleskin books. That you could, because you can't write unless it's in a moleskin book.
It makes you feel special, right?
With a magnetic lock and like a little, and I would just sit there and write,
That's a diary. What are you talking about? You little key, and a little key.
It wasn't a diary. Yeah.
The heart-shaped lock.
No, they always had like skulls on them or like gold embroidery.
Oh, nice.
Or just flat leather, and I would write screenplays in them. Or what I thought were screenplays, what I thought were going to be published books at the age of 12.
Oh, yeah, I did.
What was one of the stories about?
So they were all, it was just
that
like
you thought was going to be the next big hit.
So I guess at that time I was really into the original Halo game. So I was like, I want to make my own story about super soldiers fighting aliens, but it had all these weird...
farting aliens?
I slipped up. Freudian slip or something.
No, that's even better.
Fighting aliens.
Super
Wow,
soldiers
that is
farting out aliens.
Fighting
That
aliens.
is going to be the winning story right there.
Fighting aliens.
That screenplay is going to happen.
It sounds more like a short film.
A one-hit wonder. It's like that shark movie. It's like, how long can it last? The preview covers it all. Sorry.
Okay,
It's
so
better to
then
laugh about it.
fighting
than let it
aliens.
slide.
And that was pretty much it, but it had all these weird kind of young me biases that I would pick up from my grandparents, like so randomly, like these main characters would be talking about, aliens or something, and then out of nowhere to be like, yeah, those damn limp-spined Europeans, and I'm like, okay. Or the sweet Lord Jesus will protect us from these alien foes. And it was just like,
awesome.
I was reading through them like a couple months ago, and I was just like, what the fuck?
That's amazing. You need to save those. Those should be...
I still have them.
Sweet baby Jesus will save us. That's awesome.
There's nothing more humbling than that, too.
Yeah, you're like...
I feel like writers have this one thing, right? Like if you start at an early age, then you have a book full of crap.
Yeah, it's like oh.
It's built up in your head as an adult if you haven't read it for 10 years.
Like, oh,
and then
so
you're going to find it and you're going to be like, oh, I should have learned this.
Right?
Oh my God, I
Someone's
pay
gonna
good money
find
for those.
Blackmail material.
It's like one of the things that we do in the studio is when we find like old stuff, we'll get up at the table and read them. Like Johnny read some horrible poetry.
Oh yeah, well the poetry
then,
that they replaced with penis.
Then his
that wasn't
comedy
his.
workshop, he was like, "Yeah, comedy's hard." But then
it's classic
man,
Johnny. It's the shit he says all the time.
That's funny too. I guess more than writers, if interviews with comedians and their first stand-up experiences, if you've heard any of those, because that's even worse. Because this is as a writer that this is the thing you're experiencing yourself, and you come back to it and go, there's some good ideas. Maybe I could mine that, and you go, oh, that's crap, right? But
get that out of here.
But for a comedian, for your first stand-up thing, to get up in front of everybody and just go, oh, none of this is funny.
Yeah, it was just. So that's the one of the kind of Marine Corps practices that we practice in the studios. Whenever you find an embarrassing old love letter that's not so lovey, but it's got a bunch of cutesy terms in it,
like the one you found.
I found a bunch of heavy metal magazines from high school. And I drug them out, and there was a letter written from Kim Sanchez in there. And they were like, let's read it. And I was like, give it to me, I will read it. And I read it out loud.
Man,
she had all kinds of cutesy terms for you.
Oh, yeah.
Like chicken lips and snookum snoogles.
They weren't that.
They were bad.
No,
what
it was,
were they?
okay, honey lamb, got a scram. That kind of shit.
That's total Kim Sanchez, though.
Yeah, that's fucking funny.
She'd
So-
probably still say that.
Yeah. She would. If she's listening, she should call in.
Call in.
Yeah.
Where's the red phone?
What else? What else?
Oh yeah, like where do you see yourself going career-wise? Let's say, like you're going to a master's of fine arts program in writing. Where do you see yourself going with that?
So, I'll slog my way through that in 2 or 3 years, and after that, I can use that and I'll teach. I'd like to teach kids how to write. Do creative writing.
So is this a real aspiration of yours?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So kids or adult or college level? Like what?
College level. If you're going to teach kids, you have to get a formal education training because I guess they expect more of you to be able to teach.
No,
children.
actually, in Texas, all you have to do is get your regular degree, and you do an alternative certification program, and it takes a couple weeks, and you're done.
Yeah, that's a good reason to move to Houston.
Yeah.
I'm sweating like a pig, and that's not so good reason to move to Houston.
Normally,
no.
places have air conditioning.
Normally, but yeah. So teaching.
We're just like the eye of the tiger around
Yeah.
here.
You're right.
No air conditioning.
Tough it out.
We're doing a podcast.
Everybody here
You don't
is
know where the
tough.
dragon's crouching or the eye of
We're
the
trying to
tiger.
toughen you up, actually. That's what we're doing here.
I'd like to go back to New Mexico and continue to be a wimp writer. I can't write in these conditions.
Oh, you gotta use Texas will toughen you up and make you a better writer.
Get right in these conditions.
But no, with an MFA, I can teach creative writing, and as a part-time professor, and I can use that to, fund whatever other side projects I want to chase, because writing novels, unless you're, some fancy top-notch writer, it's not a very secure way to make money. It's not a guaranteed way to make money either. So until you really have a baseline, or an identity to your name, or an identity to kind of fall back on, or a backlog of books, it's not super stable. But most art isn't. But writing, I think, is particularly fickle.
Don't I know it?
You're not supposed to lean in.
He's emphasizing.
Yes.
So if you were, this is the question I always like for if you remove money from the equation, what will you do?
I'd write.
You'd write.
I'd write all the time.
And what the book, the subject matter of the book that you have right now, is that sort of what you pursue? Is there other sorts of genres or styles?
I like fantasy a lot. I would love to dip into science fiction, or historical fiction, or historical nonfiction. Either or would be great. But I think fantasy is my preferred genre, and then I could see myself dipping into these other genres. I don't know if I could do just raw literature. I don't know if I have the gall for that, or the confidence, or the academic kind of mindset to do that. I don't know. Poetry, I'm not very good at poetry. Nonfiction, personal nonfiction, never.
Well, you can feel free to use Honey Lamb, I Got a Scram.
I mean, if I were to do nonfiction, I could just write my dad's life and have a great story.
You can do your biography.
Yeah, you want a biography?
There you go.
No.
Well, what about? Have you ever thought about?
Terrible. You'd have to interview me so much.
Oh my God.
I want to hear all these
Ridiculous.
stories. I want to read that book.
Uh,
Wait, so have you all ever thought about writing graphic novels and doing a collaboration with any people who do artsy things?
So we've talked about it. So me and my dad have talked about doing graphic novels together. I'd love to do it. It's definitely be a change of medium. Writing graphic novels is very different from writing a novel or something like that, just because you have to be so much tighter with your writing.
Neil Gaiman did it.
Yeah, well, Neil Gaiman's, he's a magical man.
We're gonna go see him on the 8th.
yes.
He's
Oh, yeah?
coming to Houston.
I'm gonna
If
be
you,
gone.
if you were still here, I would have gotten you a ticket.
Yeah, but I have to go back to work.
Fuck work.
Corporate work.
Call in
corporate
sick.
work.
So
Oh,
ma-
I
You
so
go too stoned.
I don't. That's a rumor.
show up blazed, man.
Why are you making rumors?
I'm too blazed to make it in, guys, and they can go see you.
That's not how you get out of work.
So maybe for Big Myth, you could write a self-contained short story that maybe has a story arc over a couple of
Maybe.
issues, since
Maybe.
that's the way we're kind of approaching. We're also collaborating on a map.
We are collaborating on a
for,
map.
his
Well, you've been
Oh.
commissioned. Yeah, so
You're-
his stories.
You're working for him now.
Yeah,
I like
yes.
that.
I've commissioned him to to tighten up the map that'll go on the front of the book.
Tighten it up.
Generic fantasy map in front of a book, just to sort of kind of make it more minimalist, easier to print, easier to read, that sort of stuff.
So the question I had about like sort of where you would go with fiction and the stuff that you're doing is that obviously if you're going to create more
Oh
you know,
shit.
more fantasy around this, then you would go to you would be creating more worlds. So and that's a huge commitment, like as you're already seeing with this, right?
Mhm.
Like let's say you're creating a map, like from what I hear, you're collaborating with your dad on that, and then you have this the whole. Obviously, you probably have a ton of notes
Mhm.
about how this whole thing is working, and that, I mean, I could list all the things that go into creating a world, but that seems like in a lot of ways like something that you're into as much as writing.
Well, I think just with the genre, it comes like it's part of the deal. Is what you do. It's just kind of imagining these kind of things, and it is a big task. But I think the big key to doing that is that the world kind of forms around some central idea. Most books are formed around a central idea, and then the world should form around the book or the stories that you're trying to tell, I think. And so I think if you know where you want to go with your stories, you'll be able to kind of shape the world or develop the world from there. That's kind of what I've done. Is I started with these core ideas of like a few stories, and then built the world backwards to kind of help enrich the story. I'm not writing the books to try to, like, let's say Tolkien wrote his stuff to preserve his language. I'm not writing the stories to preserve the world. I'm writing the world to kind of help the story.
As a vehicle for the story.
As a vehicle for the story. It's just sort of an interesting setting. Because all aspects of a story are important. You can't just focus on just the setting, which usually a world is just the setting, or it's a little bit more than the setting. It has to do with the characters, it influences stuff like that. But I think it's a way, you could do as much or as little as you need, and then you could always go above and beyond that if you want. So it is a commitment, but it's an exciting one to have to create these new sort of areas to explore. For the reader and for myself. I think, I'm excited for it, but I'll cross that bridge when I get to it.
Okay, so top 3 stories ever.
So just stories ever?
Yeah, they're like just on your list. Whether it's, I don't care what format it's in, movie, because I mean all of these stories have to be written.
Okay, so in no particular order. So I'm a huge fan of the original 3 Star Wars movies. They swept me off my feet as a child, and I have a lot of nostalgia for them. And they've really influenced where I've gone as a writer. Then following that would be, I think The Odyssey is a good one. I've dipped a lot into The Odyssey for influence, and so have a lot of other people. It's just such a great sort of, epic story that's followed people. It really captures what humans are looking, or what mankind is looking for in like a story. It's that kind of core central myth. It has everything that sort of traps us is people in this idea or these concepts or these stories. And then third, I would have to say, I don't know. I really like To Kill a Mockingbird. I think that was a really good story in how it presented. It's maybe not. I'm sure people will have very different opinions than myself on this one, but I think it was a very influential story, and it shows how effective a story can be in like conveying ideas and changing perceptions on topics or stuff like that.
Awesome.
Yeah,
those great stories.
I cried.
Yeah. And then, what are you reading now? Anything interesting?
So right now, I'm reading a book called The Wise Man's Fear. It's a fantasy book. I just finished rereading East of Eden and a book called Dispatches, which is like a collection of a journalist's accounts when it comes to, or during his time as like a journalist in Vietnam. And so I wanted to read something a little easier, a little bit more in genre. Not easier, but less mentally taxing than like, gruesome Vietnam and, literary Steinbeck.
Yeah. Which is a great book, but you're right. It is taxing
it's like,
to read it. It's
and so I'm reading this fantasy book, and it's cool. I love the stories. Next, I plan to try and read Brothers Karamazov.
That's a good one.
That's a big, hefty one, but Russian literature, it has a certain poetic, beautiful quality to it that I enjoy, but is very very hard to penetrate. So
yeah,
that's what I'm looking forward to reading next.
Yeah, this is a good book.
Yeah, I've always heard it's great. I want to get on board, get on that bandwagon.
That makes me want to go read the photographer's accounts, though. No, you'll have to pass that name on to me. So,
Will do.
Anything else that we have here? I think we're good. I think it's a good interview.
It was a great interview.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Ryan
Sishc,
for joining us. We've had Ashley
Oceananigans.
I'm Lloyd Lines.
That's
And then we have Troy Winscott in the room, so the introductions at the end here. So thank you very much, Ryan, and good luck with your master's program.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
All right, that was a really nice interview with Ryan Sishc. I know how to pronounce it now, I think. Do you remember anything about that interview, Troy?
We talked to him about what his favorite stories were overall of all time, and East of Eden came up.
It's a really good book. I haven't thought about that in a really long time.
I might have smoked my way through that book, so I don't remember too much about it.
And then there's a movie, I think it has Bette Davis in it, doesn't it?
Yes.
And what's his name? James Dean?
Does it?
Was it James Dean that's in that?
Ooh.
Or am I? No, I might be thinking of something totally different. But
whoa. But then he also brought up fantasy. That overall he was.
Yeah, he's more on the side of fantasy.
Wanted to dabble into some sci-fi at some point.
Yeah, and he's developing a whole world. That's some of the things that are really interesting. I talk a lot about the developing worlds and the sort of commitment it takes, and that people usually just scab stuff on to other worlds. There's this sort of risk about the amount of time that you put into developing a world. And I think all of us, we have examples that we could talk about right here of trying to develop worlds that we were going to derive fantasy or science fiction stories out of.
Yeah.
And but it's always nice to hear when somebody actually is following through on it. Like they continue, because what we started to do was share the risk with groups of people.
Yeah.
Like we were in a freaking rock and roll band,
Right.
And then the bass player quit, and then the world's gone.
Right.
That's an interesting metaphor for how to put that.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so I'm going to bring up another point in this this interview that I think is interesting, because Ryan is your son.
Yes.
And something occurred to me to ask you in this particular process, because Ryan's a creative type, totally different person than you. We all know that. Our kids are totally different than us in a lot of ways.
One can hope.
Yeah, at least in the sense that they don't carry guns to shoot themselves in the foot with. Right? They seem to seize on opportunities a little better. I mean, he's going into a master's program. You're going to be 50 this year?
50.
And you're still working on that first degree. Not that I have one.
Hurts my neck.
When you're talking to Ryan now, especially, now as he's a young man, you're not just like, killing time talking about stories when he was like 14 or 13. Right. And now he's like, on his path and his direction. And do you ever think about like where you were at that age and sort of like compare your process to his process? I'm not even talking about success or, where he's going. It's
14 or 23?
23. Maybe both. I don't know.
Well, 23, I would have been still in art school, I believe. Yeah, I would have been, second or third year back in art school.
Yep.
And what was your question?
Like compare your process, like the way you think about things and the way that, you're, where you are in like just in terms of vision and motion moving forward, compared to like where Ryan is now.
At age 50?
Or at whichever age you would choose. But really, what I was thinking of when you're talking to him, do you think of yourself at 23 and go, "Wow, this is totally different"?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think I was still trying to figure out so much crap. Number one, like what world I wanted to be in, whether it was fine art or illustration, and I think. I had a whole camp of friends that were fine artists that were coming out of U of H, and I had a whole camp that were in like design school and like just art school in general, and I've always gravitated more towards being an illustrator, but at that point, a lot of my fine art friends were questioning whether I should even be in the fine art world. To be honest, I mean, that was a lot of kind of the rift. There was that.
So you were in art school, and it was a fine arts focus?
No, this one was not. My first one was a fine arts focus, but this was more graphic design and illustration of like what it was at the time. This is before Photoshop or the creative suites or any kind of programs, really. I mean, the most advanced thing that we had at the time was Paint, like Microsoft Paint.
Yeah.
How we think of Microsoft Paint in like 1995.
Yeah.
That was the most advanced. You could go in and alter pixels, which was just total crap. But that was going to be the future. And so, process-wise, not good.
Yeah.
At 23, I was still just doing what. I was still all over the place, and also trying to figure out where activism fit in all of this. But I think places like we had the old coffee shop, Downtown Grounds. I think that was a great spot to kind of figure all that out. And,
yeah.
I mean, how long did that place exist?
It was only like a year or two.
Yeah, it seemed like it was forever, but it was only like a year, I guess, in my memory.
I remember leaving and then coming back, and it was not there anymore. Like it was just, you come back and you go, where are the people? Just go to Downtown Grounds.
Right.
Yeah.
And didn't you help put that place together?
Yeah, I helped a little bit on cleaning it out because that was like the whole point of it.
Yeah.
But then I played opening night in there, which was the band that was supposed to show up to play opening night just didn't show up, and I happened to be there with a guitar.
Fortunately, it was full of artists like all the time, and so it kind of had that artist collective feeling that you had while you were down there.
Yeah.
You go down there and talk about music or art or whatever.
This is really interesting because usually the way we're talking about like millennials is that they don't have access to this. Mm-hmm. But the way you just presented it is almost as a distraction. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like Orion has a lot more focus at 23 than either one of us did. And we'd go to Downtown Grounds, next thing you know, we'd be involved in a month's worth of activism, right? Which got no one anywhere, but it was a lot of fun. There's got like good stories and experience that happened out of that. And maybe some of that is missing from the equation, but Downtown Grounds could ultimately be like a real distraction. We just show up and shoot the shit forever, right? Not that Orion's sitting there or
I think
there
that's also demographics, right? Finish what you were saying.
Well, not that Ryan's like sitting there working at home, like instead of being at Downtown Grounds, right? It's just that we compare, like, a lot of the time when the millennials are being criticized, they're being criticized because they don't have any focus, and they don't have. But if you get this conversation talking about us at 23, there's just no way. We had no focus at all, especially as artists or even activists, for that matter. So.
Well, I just comparing the two and the time periods. I don't know. I mean, I kind of think you do the best with what you've got. I think our generation was still surfing off the coattail of artists that were, like, coming out of the 50s and 60s, and we were just trying to figure it out, right? Like, as a distraction, I mean, that makes sense on a lot of, because otherwise, I had shows at downtown grounds that talk about a major distraction. I couldn't come pick up my artwork on time, and so therefore somebody stole it all, like out of the back of Houston studios. So talk about a major distraction. The shit that didn't sell is stolen, so you got to start all over again. Part of it might be demographics, in that in Albuquerque, New Mexico, I got a fuck ton done compared to
Houston.
Yeah.
That's also a good point. He grew up in Albuquerque, where there's a lot less to do.
So you just sit around and you do that kind of stuff anyway. You sit around and you just develop your art. Talk about a place that has more art to talk about than and more talent to talk about than any place else.
Albuquerque.
Yeah, it's insane. So I mean, the incredible amount of talent, an incredible amount of work, incredible amount of art to talk about, but
there's no credit given.
Nobody wants to pay for it,
and no one wants to talk about anything but the native art that's happening.
That southwestern native stuff that's going around, and it's just that talk about a distraction.
Yeah,
what's actually going on. I mean,
yeah, so if you go, I want to make money from art, then you end up doing this particular thing, which is so far away from your focus.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's interesting to talk to Ryan. Of course, I've known him his whole life. So to see his development, and now he's on his way to a fine arts, master's in creative writing. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So just to add on to that, I mean, I really found the focus and, like, what I really wanted out of art, like, in Albuquerque.
No kidding.
Yeah. I mean,
so you found your focus there.
That's where I found it. I mean, like, I was kind of all over the map for, like, many, many years, and then somewhere in '98 I went, hey, I want to do something with this. I didn't figure it out until, like, I think 2002, when I got involved with a bunch of guys that were doing comic books, and I spent every day, like, just working on comic books for, like, 2.5 years, and I definitely remember, like, working on a particular piece and finishing it and going, that's exactly what I wanted to do. Oh. Exactly. And that was the first time ever that I'd ever done that. But that was just real, like, I've got nothing better to do than sit around and do art.
Huh. Wow.
So I think that's probably a great kind of spot, like, demographically, to figure out, like, really how to hone.
Yeah, it gives the the idea if you go to the shed, like in music, you're gonna go shed and you go sit in a room.
I mean, if you're really focused and you really want to do it, Albuquerque, New Mexico is the place to go. You just go off and fall off the face of the earth and just.
But I do remember that focus that you're talking about that ends up, like I've always heard music in my head.
Yeah.
Translating it to instruments was a totally different thing, and I do remember the moment where, like, I went, oh, I hear that, and then I went, bink, and it was out.
Yeah, right.
And you go, that was exactly what I was hearing.
Right.
That's interesting. All right. Well, that was a good episode. Ryan Sishc and Madness and Genius, and we'll see you next week. I think we're Johnny Bodman next week.
Oh, I thought Madness and Genius was Johnny Bodman.
No.
Oh, okay. My bad.
No, we're just going to cut that piece out.
Miracle of technology. Great. Make it happen, Larry.
Not that Madness and Genius doesn't belong with talking to Johnny Bodman.
Oh, here.
Yeah, there you go. All right, see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Twisted Podcast. For show notes, go to twistedpop.com/twistedpodcast. Merchandise at bigmyth.com. That's big-mith.com. In association with nquit.com. Until next time, this is the Twisted Podcast.